Welcome to FYI, the 4-Year Innovation Podcast. This show offers an intellectual discussion on technologically enabled disruption, because investing in innovation starts with understanding it. To learn more, visit arc-invest.com.
ARC Invest is a registered investment advisor focused on investing in disruptive innovation. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. It does not constitute, either explicitly or implicitly, any provision of services or products by ARC. All statements made regarding companies or securities are strictly beliefs and points of view held by ARC or podcast guests, and are not endorsements or recommendations by ARC to buy, sell, or hold any security. Clients of ARC Investment Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Hello and welcome to FYI, ARC's 4-Year Innovation Podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Issam El Naqa. He is the founding chair of the Department of Machine Learning at the Moffitt Cancer Center here in Tampa, Florida. Dr. El Naqa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a true pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, excited for the conversation.
Likewise.
So we're also excited that Frank is joining us for a Real Convergence podcast. So Frank is our Director of Research, Next Gen Internet, and we're really excited to just dig right in. So Dr. El Naqa, we'd love to hear first just about your background, how you became interested. You know, at ARC, we always talk about the convergences between and among different technologies. And so I know you focus on medical physics, or you have at least focused on medical physics in the past, artificial intelligence and oncology, which is something you don't hear every day. So we'd love to hear about sort of the journey of how you got there.
Thank you, Adam, Frank. Honestly speaking, it was a random walk, nothing really pre-planned. So I started my career in electrical engineering, and I became a software engineer post-graduations. And I was always inspired doing work in medicine by my parents. So my dad happens to be a physician. So I always looked for this opportunity, how we can use engineering principles for application in medicine. So later on, I had different areas that I've worked through. So my first interaction with medicine was actually joining a medical school in Germany, and there worked on bioinformatics, computer science type applications. Then later on came to the United States, completed the graduate studies here. And during the time I was looking for a postdoctoral fellowship, I stumbled on an area that sounded related to medicine, but wasn't clear to me what's called medical physics. So having spoken with the people in the University of WashU in St. Louis, started explaining to me what that is all about. And the main selling point for me at the time that different from biomedical engineering, medical physicists are actually people who work in the clinic. So it was the closest association for a non-medical professional to be in a clinical settings. And I was quite intrigued by how this technology was influencing patient care, particularly patient with cancer. There are two primarily applications. One is in diagnostics, which is probably well known to most people, generating different type of images, whether are CT, MRI, PET, you name it. And there is another aspect, probably less well known, is related to using high energy radiation, X-ray for cancer treatment, which happened to be the area that I later focused on. One thing led to another. I've been working in the area of medicine and medical physics in association with my engineering background, which actually focused on AI applications for the past 2 decades. And here we are going full circle from working in medical physics and AI to going back to working on AI only.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just thinking about the journey from medical physics and even thinking about medical physics in the context of cancer treatment is, I think, really interesting. But so you mentioned that obviously medical physics and AI can help impact cancer treatment. So can you give some examples of things that you've seen in which it has been impactful?
Yeah, one of the areas that I think is unique to the application of of AI in medicine vis-a-vis medical physics, that people in medical physics were one of the earliest groups in medicine to stumble on AI application and its utilization, particularly in the diagnostic world. Imaging is a complex amount of information. It needs more sophisticated tool in order to be able to decipher this kind of knowledge. So early computer detection applications started to use AI technologies that were available at the time. And if you look at some of the literature associated with that, AI as a field formally started probably in 1956 by the Dartmouth College summer school. First AI application in medicine was in radiology a few years after, in the 60s. And that was followed by the 1970s, where there are mixed feelings towards AI, but people probably heard call AI winter. But I think many of the people in the field of medicine, particularly in radiological sciences, felt the benefit at the time, despite the challenges associated with AI applications, particularly when the fields of computer-aided detection, computer-aided diagnostic came aboard. And later on, that was followed in the 90s by application in complex technologies like radiation therapy, where that value was felt dearly. It's not only imaging you are dealing with, but also additional information related to treatment planning, which is a very large scale optimization problem that can benefit significantly for AI. Now, we need to recognize AI development at the time does not match what we have currently available as tools, but nevertheless, it was found to be a very useful technology in order to be able to decipher, again, very complex information that is embedded in imaging itself. Myself, I'm going to rewind a little bit. I did actually my PhD work on analysis of medical imaging. So I'm just following suit what everybody else was doing at the time, try to see what technologies can be used to analyzing imaging. But I was working with a, let's say, hardcore signal processing group who didn't think AI techniques were the right way to go with that. So we tried every algorithm that existed in statistical signal processing at the time. None of them actually was able to provide satisfactory answer. The problem we were dealing with is trying to learn radiologist perceptions of medical images, which today you would think it's a more trivial problem because a lot of applications are around. At that time, there wasn't too many of these hanging around. And we tried every algorithm that existed, from all kind of filters, techniques, advanced signal processing application, maximum likelihood, a lot of different terminology. None of them were satisfactory until started. One of my advisors brought a book about one of the machine learning techniques. Ironically, it wasn't a neural network because we tried the neural networks at the time were not the best results, but it was more a conventional machine learning technique called support vector machine that provided us with satisfactory answers. Now, fast forward to the future. Since then, I've been doing AI and AI applications in medical physics.
You and Ali are definitely the diagnostic and therapeutic experts on the call, but I'm coming from a more general view, so I'll ask maybe a tangential question. But you said neural networks at the time weren't necessarily as useful, or support vector machines were better. Has that changed in recent years? Like, obviously, like the consumer and enterprise software world has been set ablaze with the launch of ChatGPT. And now everyone's excited about large language models and transformer networks. Has that factored into your line of work at all, or is it not there yet? Will it in the future? How does it apply or not apply?
I knew you would ask something like that. So, what I meant to say that practically when we were trying to apply neural networks at the time and try to model a complex problems like a perception, right? That requires larger data sets, what was available at the time for us. Now, given the nature of the data, and here I'll probably get a little bit technical, it was homogeneous kind data. Well, that's debatable, but imaging information was available. But we did use deep learning principles. We were actually operating directly on the pixels after filtering them using a support vector machine. We also compare these with the neural networks that were developed at the time, not necessarily the more sophisticated techniques that are currently available, but at that time, it seems that it was easier to optimize with the compute resources that were available. I mean, that's a little bit precedes having, I'm dating myself, little precedes having this more advanced graphical GPUs type technology. And what SVM offered is a global optimization problem. So it was easier to train. Now, training a neural network at the time will take, without exaggeration, a few weeks. While training that other algorithm will take maximum, probably 6 to 8 hours. So it was easier to optimize given the time constraints. It doesn't say that one is better than the other, but SVMs has a global optimal characteristics while neural networks are locally optimal. So you have to do more efforts, and some of the newer technologies that's being used and dropouts and random optimizations were not yet developed to the level that would allow to get more robust results, which is what graduate students is looking for.
That's interesting. So you have obviously tremendously more compute resources at your disposal today, and presumably more data, but maybe not as much as you'd want. What are the bottlenecks that you kind of see today that are in front of you?
Yeah, definitely the computer resources has advanced tremendously. The computer algorithms have advanced tremendously, both on the technical side and in the availability. In the past, you had to program, working with a neural network, you had to practically program it from scratch, which is currently you can use many of the available libraries. Same thing with other algorithms. So that's another degree of complexity we had. Data was whatever was available for us. Collaboration with other institutions was the typical practice we had at the time. And data, again, comes to be the biggest problem now. With the increase in compute resources, the further development of the computer algorithms, data became, again, the bottleneck. Availability, especially with medical data, where there are a lot of issues associated with its quality, its availability, missing informations. So if you are dealing with, working with the diagnostic world was the simplest because PACS system made things easier. Working with the EHR system was a super complicated problem, probably until now, because the information is not machine learning ready type information to be used. Now, you want to couple that with multimodal information, not only imaging, but also unstructured data is coming from the EHR, molecular data, and so on. So one of the main bottlenecks is having more organized machine-ready data sets. Then we start thinking about what algorithmic solution we can provide for them. So somehow the algorithm went very much ahead of where we are with our data resources that are medically available.
So just a question, and this might be a very low-hanging fruit, but we saw today as the date that we're recording the podcast that Moderna struck a deal with OpenAI for GPTs. And we saw a quote from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who said, people literally talk about how AI is going to cure diseases someday. And I think this is a very meaningful first step. And so we're hearing that they're going to be using GPT for optimal doses for clinical trials. They're going to draft responses to questions from regulators and many other applications. Do you think that there's a place for GPT in sort of the clinic and, at Moffitt specifically? And how helpful do you think it's going to be?
No, this is a great point, Ali. I think I've been one of also the people who have been very impressed with what generative AI was able to deliver on. And ChatGPT is probably a prime example of that. And if you put a tool in the public hand, you come up with extremely amazing ideas. And I think that's one of the main successes among others, that that group was able to provide. It's not only they did a tremendous job by leveraging the whole internet for developing a large language model, but at the same time, they demonstrated its efficacy and provided an API to make it available for everybody else, so everybody else can come up with these new ideas, new applications. Here at Moffitt, we're leveraging technologies. I prefer to call it more large language model technology, generative AI technologies, than being restrictive with what GPT specifically is able to offer. But in principle, the answer is yes. One of the low-hanging fruit we think is direct application of the large language models into the EHR and trying to identify, for instance, I don't know about prescription and dosing yet, but at least automation of some of the mundane processes. For instance, that takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. For instance, coding and billing, which is very important. Moffitt actually announced a couple of weeks ago their partnership with Nvidia, Deloitte, and Oracle on a project specifically using large language models type technologies like GPT, as well as more traditional natural language processing in order to facilitate leveraging coding information, assessment of billing codes for application within the EHR.
Just because we're talking about billing codes, and I feel like the thing that comes up most for me is the United Change attack that happened, or I guess the attack on United Change. So obviously from the billing perspective, it was a huge impact on our healthcare system. Most hospitals couldn't get prior auths before. So do you think that these type of applications can help with creating more decentralized payment systems and maybe even help with sort of cybersecurity? And now we're getting more into Frank's territory from the AI perspective, but Frank, maybe you also have thoughts there. I know we talked a lot about the attack and how much it impacted our healthcare system.
Yeah. From my perspective, I mean, the attack is a setback with a lot of healthcare and healthcare applications, because we were talking momentarily ago about data and potential data sharing initiatives, and attacks like these kind of put more guardrails on healthcare data. And the saddest part about this, that I think United Health had no choice but to pay the ransom in order to keep that data protected, which would pretty much encourage also other bad actors to do similar things. So it's kind of it's unfortunate. It's a reality to have to deal with. One of the things that we've been trying to work with in collaboration with other institutions is to move from centralized databases to federated databases and try to include in the design of these algorithms some cybersecurity principles. So we're working with researchers at the University of South Florida in developing this hybrid system that can have an AI applications, but in a secure type environment. Now, Frank can speak better to this. There are software ways, there are hardware ways. It's not my area of expertise, so I'll probably defer to him.
No, I was actually going to ask you a follow-up on how it works on a more technical level, but yeah, it's quite interesting. There's and kind of actually top of mind this week when we're recording. I'm not sure when it'll be published, but there's a new cybersecurity IPO for a company called Rubrik that actually focuses on data protection and security, particularly on ransomware attacks. And I mean, like, to oversimplify, one of the things that they do is that for managing backups to enable recovery and not reinfection of data, if you have a ransomware attack, is make that data non-editable. Which sounds simple, but it's when data is backed up, it becomes basically solidified and frozen so that it can't be corrupted and then encrypted by a ransomware solution, which is like one of many ways that I think people are trying to solve this problem, and more use of those types of tools, I think demand will go up and more use will help prevent these attacks in the future. But it's a challenge because there's so many legacy systems out there that need to be modernized and secured against increasingly sophisticated threats, and particularly like one of the things that we're thinking about and worried about with the proliferation of large language models is how sophisticated phishing scams are getting. So it's easier and easier to penetrate into a network. And so you need these what's called zero trust security policies to try to authenticate at every layer of the stack to minimize the amount of damage that an intruder can do, assuming that they are able to get into your system.
Yeah, one of the technologies that we've been working on for that federated network is looking at some of the differential privacy techniques, which is practically adding noise to the weights that are generated by the algorithms. Because when you are exchanging weights, it seems there are also opportunity to reverse engineer what the data is. Zero trust policy, that's when accessing the data. Oh, yeah, we have the data behind the firewall. Nevertheless, there are still ways to recreate the data itself. We are also exploring with our colleagues a combination of hardware and software tools for protection. Now, the issue becomes like this, since you're asking about the technical question, is the trade-off between efficiency applying an algorithm, which is the less overhead that you are going to add with encryption methods, versus what you can achieve in terms of the operations that you are expecting from the AI algorithm in real time. So more encryption, irrespective of the technology, meaning less efficiency. But that's the trade-off that we probably need to deal with in order to balance security needs with whatever AI applications that we are working on. So that's kind of part of the future we live in. Now, speaking of technologies, and I think that's one of the questions Ali posted earlier, is that, whether technologies like ledger technology, blockchain, would help with applications like that. I had colleagues who's working on encryption techniques that using quantum principles, which is, in theory, it's not destructible, but when you are talking about phishing and phishing expedition type methods, it's not sure what would be the right protection technique for it.
Yeah. So moving away from cybersecurity, it's just top of mind because of the attack, obviously. And I know Frank and I also discussed it a lot. But I think one thing you mentioned that was really interesting and also kind of top of mind for me because I broke my foot last week. But you talked about imaging techniques. So just thinking about how AI can be really helpful in terms of imaging techniques. I had an MRI, but, CT, PET, and obviously for way more important things like in cancer diagnosis, also treatment planning, maybe even helping to figure out, different ways in which you can give patients personalized treatments. So I'm just curious about your role in some of that. Obviously, it's a huge and really important area in getting patients what they need. So
I wish you a speedy recovery first. Sorry to hear that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, imaging has been at the forefront of many of the AI applications by its nature. An image worth 1,000 words, and there is a whole field of doing omics with imaging called radiomics. We presented some of the earliest applications on that, and you cannot really do that omics with imaging, the radiomics part, without having an AI techniques that are able to deal with complex data such as imaging information. Now, you mentioned different imaging modalities that in theory can provide complementary information, and fusing these kind of images is another AI applications where you can bring together the different parts from the different images. MRI is very good in soft tissue discrimination. CT can give you this bulk structure, bony anatomy information, among other. That can give you functional information. So you can create a mosaic out of all these images that can potentially use for better diagnosis. In areas I work in therapy, probably used for more tailoring personalized type therapy to the patients by looking at these different components of the images together that allow you to make a more informed type decision.
Have you guys thought about doing like 3D models out of the images using AI to get even more clarity?
more sophisticated in terms of reconstruction, it's the areas of image reconstruction we worked on as primarily is there are two types. There is one type is seeing what would be the actual 3D volume, different projections that one would have, which is pretty much an image reconstruction type problem, which exists. It can be done with AI, without AI. Maybe there are faster ways of doing it with AI. AI can provide more efficiency, more better image quality. But there is also generated images that are not actually captured by the hardware technologies, which is creating, that I mentioned, the mosaic of the different information. You can make it volumetric, definitely. And that would include also, graphic arts, rendering type technology built into the design of these techniques. So the short answer, it has been around for medical image applications. Its usage differs between the different applications we have. For instance, for radiotherapy treatment planning, an area I work in, there is always a tendency whenever you are putting this structure together to do an image rendering. You can do it. You don't need an AI associated with that because you are using the raw actual images. But you can use AI techniques to create a more augmented reality type images by bringing other pieces of information that may not exist in the actual system, but could be also informative. For example, where the radiation beam could be best positioned, what kind of setup would be most useful for that patient? Can we visualize, the information surrounding the cancer, how deep we can get into that type of settings, particularly when you are dealing with complex, assuming you are dealing with, image-guided surgery applications where, the surgeon would like to have more perspective on where things have happened. This could be all simulated in whether it's full virtual reality type system or an augmented reality type system. That can be very much done. We have interest in one application related to that because we've developed a probe that allows us to visualize radiotherapy. And the motivation is to collect more information. So I'm going always back to the data questions, but we don't know where we can set up that probe best. It's an ultrasound probe. It's a bulky probe. So using these augmented reality techniques can potentially help in that area. And this is a very nice AI applications that you can live in that semi-virtual world with AI that can be very useful for many medical procedures, whether it is surgery, radiation oncology, or and so on.
Yeah, it's super interesting. When you're describing the rendering images, I was thinking of a technology Nvidia developed for video games called DLSS, the deep learning super sampling, where they're actually only rendering around like 1 out of every 8 frames, and AI is predicting the frames in between so they can render much more efficiently at high resolution. It sounds like some of those techniques have probably made their way to some of the frameworks NVIDIA has for imaging, or maybe it's just a parallel.
Yeah, no. I've been also a fan of the Omniverse that NVIDIA has been developing, and they have a lot of physics-based versus algorithmic-based that we're looking forward to leverage these techniques. We also use other open source technologies as well, beside the one developed by NVIDIA. And there is a lot of exciting applications of these technologies.
Is there anything in particular that stands out as like an aha moment where it surprised you how sophisticated the tools are getting, or is a massive kind of capability unlock for you?
I need to go one step back on what Ali mentioned with the GPT technologies. I typically, when I am doing any coding, and I still like to do my own coding, if I don't know a certain sentence or a certain structure, I go to the Google and try to go Stack Overflow or whatever website. And now I actually ask ChatGPT, just to get away from the vendor, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever technologies. I am super surprised their ability to understand the context that you are working in. I'm developing a code for a certain applications, and I'm asking very specific questions that follow kind of a flow chart of logic that I have in my mind. And in many cases, I am super surprised that the chatbot is able to understand what I am actually trying to do. In some cases, I am disappointed, but it surprised me whenever it understood what is the structure that I'm trying to program here. So that's one thing that has been quite intriguing on a personal level.
Yeah, no, it is. It's the same for me. I before coming to ARC, I used to be a software developer, and I don't get to spend as much time coding these days. But there's a lot of things that we could do at ARC if we had more time to code. And now, a lot of the research team are writing their own code because ChatGPT and similar tools are enabling it. Like, for example, there's so many new large language models coming out, and there's so many different benchmarks to piece apart and to tell the difference and see where different models are better than others, that it's getting increasingly hard to manage all of that. And I just put the prompt into the language model. If you had 10 different models and all of these benchmarks, how would you visualize the performance differences? And it gave me a few options. And then I said, okay, write all the Python code to build a dashboard for it. And it was like the entire research project that would have taken me a week was like a 20-minute exercise. And it was just really remarkable, the capability unlock. And when it works perfectly like that, it's just truly amazing. And it definitely doesn't work all the time. You'll get a hallucination and you get something that's totally off, but you can see, and they're continuously getting better.
No, they're amazingly getting better, putting the original job we had on threat.
Well, that's actually another thing that I wanted to bring up that I was kind of recognizing for some of the things you were describing is that there's commonly the fear that AI is going to take all of our jobs and displace the humans, to displace the doctor or the radiologist. But a lot of what you're talking about sounded like augmenting the surgeon, giving them more information so they can do their job better. Like, how do you view that balance and the trade-off? And in your field, do you see people stepping back and being afraid, or like really excited to embrace the new technology?
No, this is very well said, Frank. If you remember, one of the prominent leaders in the deep learning world mentioned that radiology job will disappear in a few years, and it has been many years, and this did not happen. So technology definitely is catching up, but like you said, it's an augmentation, because I don't think it is possible, maybe until now, to replace a human creativity. Despite what anybody mentioned about these AI techniques, I don't think they are there yet. Maybe the future will be different, but at least for the current status, that's the situation we have in. And one of the things is regarding this topic that AI, at least in my mind, does not take anybody's job. It maybe transform their jobs and make it different. So, for instance, there are a lot of mundane applications that slow back the healthcare system, right? Scheduling, for instance, matching patients to a particular clinical trial. When you are doing plans for treatments, I mean, there are a lot of repetitive tasks. These things, AI techniques can do extremely well because it has so many examples that it can build on and work through. That does not really require a lot of human intervention. So in these repetitive type examples, AI can excel. I mean, because eventually that's how it potentially learn. Now, when you start extrapolating to areas that the algorithm has not been trained, or there is not sufficient example for it, yes, this is where hallucination would kick in. So I think with that respect, AI can serve us very well in terms of automation application, which is accelerating a lot of the inefficiencies that we have in our systems. And that's not taking anybody's jobs away. That's just making, like you mentioned, augmenting the positions and making your job better. Everybody who works in the medical field is always hard pressed for time. I mean, and you ask the radiologist, you ask the oncologist, they're always looking for more time to do more things that could be potentially beneficial for the patients. It's that there isn't enough time in the day to do everything that would be required to make sure that the patient is receiving the best care they should be receiving. And AI can make a tremendous strides in that, potentially improving access, reducing cost, reducing wait time. I mean, anybody who would like to see a specialist, it takes weeks to see the specialist. I mean, the disease is not waiting; it's still progressing for you to see the specialist. So that's an area that AI could have a tremendous effect on it. Now, where things differ when you start making decisions, when AI algorithms is part of your decision-making process, trying to predict behaviors, trying to predict what would be optimal solutions that does not have a ground truth associated with it. For instance, if you are taking an MRI image like I described and trying to identify a lesion, that's something an AI algorithm can do very well. There is a ground truth. You can ask the physician, and they probably point you to the same area that a well-trained algorithm was able to detect. But now, if we are going to take that one step further, looking beyond what there exists in that imaging information and make a decision about what treatment options, what the algorithm is going to do is going to look the history of similar patients that went through that process. But we recognize every patient is unique. Every patient needs may be different. And this is where there is a lot of uncertainty with the prediction that the AI algorithm is going to do. So it will be like a human in the loop type using the AI algorithm in order to optimize whatever decision making where there is a ground truth associated with it. When there isn't a ground truth, I don't think we should let at least current versions of AI decide what would be the next step. And most likely the predictions have a very large error bar associated with them. You want to call it hallucination, so be it. But this is where newer technologies that need to be coupled with AI or AI grounded in reality need to be advanced.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and you see it kind of firsthand because you're in such a human field that the consequences of making the wrong decision are really high, right? I'm wondering, I don't know if you spent time. There's a lot of talk in the AI research community about agentic workflows for large language models, or how you can give them, or trying to make them have better planning and reasoning and kind of reflective capabilities. And I've seen some talk of basically building the scientific method into a model, or the loop in which a model is operating, where the model creates a hypothesis and then is able to test that hypothesis and then evaluate the results and use this as a form of new scientific discovery. Do you buy into that's possible? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Let me take it one step back. With large language model and the success they have, language has a structure, has a grammar, so it's a well-defined problem, and potentially you can learn this kind of a problem by. The answer may not be correct, but grammatically, structurally sounds right. That's give you the impression of something that is going through many examples that can be done. Now, I'm probably being repetitive here. For problems that you have so many examples where the scientific method has been repeated over and over again, yeah, probably the Gen AI can give you a systematic description about logical steps that has been taken over and over again. If science, which is what we all believe is about new discoveries and innovations, I don't think that can be actually trained. This is something we are still trying to understand. What's the mind of somebody like Einstein is thinking of. That's not something can easily be broken into computer, or somebody who can look at the same problem an average person like myself is looking at and see something totally different, right? So you see something that is totally unique and innovative that the average person cannot see. That stuff I don't think AI algorithms are poised to do, ready to do. I doubt they would be able to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because some people have said that that hallucinations, like if you're trying to do something that diagnose a patient, right? You don't want hallucinations, But if you're trying to come up with future solutions to a big problem, are hallucinations a form of creativity where you're coming up with these things that may or may not be true? And then if you give, let's say, a good enough simulation environment so it can happen digitally with an understanding of physics and medicine, can the model then go use those tools to test its hypothesis and think to itself or understand as the results, oh, that actually was not true. I had an idea, it was wrong. Here's why it was wrong, and iterate on this loop to get better over time. And I think it's an unknown question, but it's interesting to think about when you give the models tools. Yeah.
The way you are structuring it, Frank, makes perfect sense. That you have a very specific problems. You are collecting information from multiple resources, including some physical laws, and trying to ask whether this is matched what in reality is. But this is, again, looking backward. This is not looking forward. And that's where I try to differentiate between trying to be creative and ingenuous by looking forward, what could be the next thing versus what happened in the past and what are the probability of selecting something from the past. That's yet to happen. I don't know what would be the breakthrough associated with it, but with the current technologies we have, my answer would be skeptic at best.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think a lot are waiting for that breakthrough. It's definitely a debate, but not proven one way or the other.
You are learning from memory, right? You are learning by playing memories. And that's what including the best architectures we have, probably Transformative and its variants. It's playing memory back over and over again and trying with different probabilities. If that's what defining creativity for a human, and I don't think it is, your answer would be right. But I differ to see that there are people who still can see outside the box, which is, I don't think these algorithms are yet trained to see outside the box. They have a bigger box than the box we have, but they are not seeing outside of it yet.
I think two things that are interesting here. One, we're talking about having creative solutions and things like that. But in medicine, it's always good to think outside of the box, but there's also somewhat of a narrow box in terms of what we know. And I think education and literature is very important in medicine. And so one thing that, I was at IBM previously, and one thing that we talked about a lot with Watson was that physician just can't keep up with the amount of literature that they should be reading in order to keep sort of on the ball in terms of the latest and most important innovative medicine and solutions. So one, I think, AI could certainly be used as a literature search tool. And so, Frank, I think you mentioned some instances where maybe, you have an option of looking and seeing, hey, this was an out-of-the-box solution, but actually it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for these reasons. So I think AI is a powerful tool to say, hey, you may want to read these 3 papers. And we actually looked at patenting a tool that would look at the type of words or concepts that you may be unable to understand given your level of understanding in science and medicine. And then maybe they could provide resources like someone in your network that might understand it or some other papers. So I think that's a really interesting application. And I also think that one thing that maybe we haven't talked about as much, which may be the most important, is just the quality of the data. So obviously we know that the quality of the data is really paramount, but how do you guys at Moffitt and just sort of in your past work, how do you ensure that the data is of the utmost quality and that the outputs that you're able to generate are going to be the best that they can be? And then one challenge that we saw a lot was integrating any new tool into a clinical workflow is incredibly challenging because, you come up with this tool and we all think it's genius, but then you figure out how a doctor or a clinician or a radiologist or whoever does their clinical workflow and implementing it. And if you're taking time away from one of their, daily tasks, then that's actually cost and can make their workflow a little bit more challenging. So just curious about how you think about getting the best data so that you get the best outputs and also integrating it through the clinical workflow process.
Thanks, Ellie. That's a composite question that needs a GPT with it in order for me to dissect every element you have with it. But let me take it one step at a time. You are absolutely right. In terms of there is an avalanche of information, presenting that information to a professional, a physician, would be very useful applications. There are several studies to suggest that a human, probably with an average skills, can juggle 4 or 5 choices. A chess grandmaster maybe can go 9, 20, I don't know how many steps forward. So reducing the amount of information, summarizing it, presenting it, is something actually our oncologists ask for. I had one person directly, having an application, practically looking at the different options for treatment, summarizing existing literature in order to make a better decision. That's a low-hanging fruit type application, definitely for that. In terms of the data, which is the source of that information and what you would like to train your algorithms, at Moffitt, luckily there is a strong informatic infrastructure. As you probably heard, that many of the data we have is actually being curated and moved to a cloud-based system. We have the Moffitt Cancer Center exploratory platform. It's MCAP, that's led by Dana Rollison here. And that will provide kind of a gold mine for doing a lot of the AI applications that you mentioned, particularly that you have now the data itself is in a better format to be used with machine learning algorithms, though there are still some steps that are required in order to get to that form, because even a great data lake system is not presenting you with machine learning ready data sets in terms how the data is presented, how it's actually categorized and labeled, and all other aspects that you would like to have to ensure in order to have a situation where you can apply it safely and algorithms to get meaningful results. Otherwise, you will get a garbage in, garbage out type situation. Now, taking machine learning algorithms, putting it into the clinic is a challenge in its own case. And as you know, there is a lot of talk about ML ops type technologies and machine learning operationalization type techniques. So at Moffitt, what we've decided to do currently in order to facilitate that process, we do have currently a process, but it's a little bit still ad hoc, that it's very complex to put a tool into a clinical environment. And you mentioned the IBM Watson, which is pretty much a poster child how these things can or cannot work. So we are hiring a person just for AI clinical implementations, who comes as well with not to surprise anybody, comes also with a credential in machine learning, definitely, but also medical physics. And I'm going back to why the medical physics aspects of this, because medical physics is built around software and software tools that is used in medicine. So there is a long history of how you take a software tool, accept and commission for clinical applications. Now, AI has its own intricacy and complexity associated with the tools itself. So it's not enough to take a tool and deploy it successfully, assuming you solve all the data engineering aspects, which is probably what most people would focus on. But there is also the use aspects of it, and the differences between the training data where the algorithm was developed and the environment where the algorithm is going to expect to be deployed. And after deployment, there is a lot of question whether, there are changes in the data. This is one of the things about medicine. MR image 10 years ago is different from an MR image today. So there are built into the process data shift, data drift, whatever you want to call it, that also need to be carefully monitored. And here we are talking about pre-trained algorithms, nothing that a dynamic learning algorithm like a reinforcement learning algorithm, which is try to learn on the fly from the different interactions. How you can potentially validate that continuously is pretty much an open question at this point.
So another topic that I think is really interesting is this kind of convergence between AI and education. What are you and Moffitt doing to kind of foster education and using AI to that extent?
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank, for this question. I think there is currently lack of experts who have joint expertise in AI and medical applications, and that's an area that we are striving to build more resources into it and develop that next generation that can understand not only the AI algorithms or the medical practice, but both together. So I have a outreach program to high schoolers, K-12 level, as well as undergraduate and graduate. We are developing with the University of South Florida an AI concentration in cancer and oncology, specifically with the goal of developing that into a fully fledged programs that will develop the next generation of AI experts that have the skill set in machine learning, in cancer research, biology, physics, and so on, that would allow them to solve the problems that we are currently struggling with.
Yeah, it's so exciting you're doing that work because I think there's so much to learn about AI, and we should teach children early as it proliferates throughout kind of all sectors of the economy and all parts of our lives. And then also it's exciting to think about how AI is going to be kind of incorporated into education itself and used as a tool for learning as we give kind of students access to some of these tools early.
Definitely. There is not much to fear from AI. We just need to understand it better and see what are the right applications.
Yeah, it's amazing. So exciting.
Awesome. That's super helpful. I definitely learned a lot from our time together. I'm sure Frank did too. And we really appreciate the time. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be back. We were really lucky to participate in the Moffitt Business of Biotech conference this year. And I'm sure we'll be back for another tour because truly what you're doing there is really important for patients and advancing medicine. So thank you.
Likewise, very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with you both and learn from your experiences, which is super helpful to us too, and look forward to future partnership with you and your team.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
ARC believes that the information presented is accurate and was obtained from sources that ARC believes to be reliable. However, ARC does not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information, and such information may be subject to change without notice from ARC. Historical results are not indications of future results. Certain of the statements contained in this podcast may be statements of future expectations and other forward-looking statements that are based on ARC's current views and assumptions and involve known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements.